Unpopular but necessary, a phrase that could be Eurozone policymakers' crisis resolution mantra. Well, today Breakingviews looks at how why retail investors in Spanish banks should take a hit, and why the Eurozone rescue funds have yet to face their biggest challenge. With me now to discuss these stories is Reuters Breakingviews' Chris Hughes. Chris, this first story on the retail investors is all to do with Spanish banks and junior creditors taking a haircut, a large haircut. But you say this is necessary. Why should the man in the street take a hit once again?
Well, look, I mean, one has some sympathy for them. Just to be clear what's going on here, as part of this mega Spanish bank bailout that we got a few weeks ago, one of the conditions that's emerging is that there is an initial restructuring of the debt, which would involve haircuts on these junior debt holders, many of whom happen to be retail investors who bought what they thought in some cases were sort of deposit-like instruments, even though they had a sort of strangely high interest rate, high yield.
Were these products missold?
Well, I don't know enough about the details on kind of how each one was sold. I mean, certainly, I think what you can say is that there's a perception that these are missold, and certainly, there may be, as we warned, there may be compensation claims if haircuts are forced on retail investors. But the reality of the situation is that there has to be a bail-in of the junior debt. I mean, if you're going to work through the capital structure, it's only right actually that there is some burden sharing here. Now, it's clearly regrettable if retail investors thought they were getting a much safer product, and rightly now there's talk of tougher regulation in the way these things are sold in future. I mean, that won't help people
who
are already
suffering. Horses and stable doors.
I mean, so I think that I think it's fair to say that in a general sense, these retail investors shouldn't have been going into these high yield instruments unless they really knew what they were getting into. But look, the principle of the bail-in is right. It's also from a practical point of view, it looks hard for Spain to avoid it. I mean, if essentially the conditions being imposed by its Eurozone backers are that there has to be this burden sharing, then so be it. So it's the right thing. It's going to be deeply unpopular. I mean, in the worst case scenario, the response to it by the investing public would be to start taking cash out and move it elsewhere. So whilst I'm saying it's the right thing, I mean it's not a risk-free way forward, and there would have to be very careful management to ensure that there wasn't any deposit flight. But it is the right thing to do.
But this has parallels with what's happened in Ireland, where investors, these retail investors, they ultimately took a haircut of around 80%. Pretty savage.
Yeah, and that actually, Ireland set the precedent here. There was legislation which was going to force debt exchanges, which then encouraged voluntary exchanges. Now, as you say, 80% haircut, pretty painful. It doesn't look as though it would be quite that bad in Spain, because if there were voluntary exchanges before the legislation comes in, then under the current system, the investors would get 10% above market, and market is currently at about sort of 70% haircut. I mean, let's not be
painful.
It's pretty painful, but some solace, not as bad as what was offered in Ireland. So on a relative basis, quite a result.
Indeed. Well, the EFSF, the rescue fund, the Eurozone rescue fund, had a successful issue yesterday. Demand for the book was well above the 6 billion offered. I think it was 6 billion. But how long can that investor demand for the EFSF, soon to be ESM? How long can that demand hold up?
I'm not sure, I have to say, because it was a surprise to me actually that sale seemed to go okay. I mean, there are, I think, a lot of concerns among bond investors buying into these, buying the issuance of these bailout funds, which as you know are jointly guaranteed by the Eurozone members. And if you look around the Eurozone, you've still got these massive doubts about Spain and Italy. So, you're going to really think twice before you start buying any of this in size, because you just still don't quite know how it's going to play out. And
but as long as Germany backs it, then it's a reasonably safe bet, isn't it?
But remember, it is a joint guarantee, if you like. Now, it's clearly a good sign. I mean, right now the yields on Spanish and Italian debt are up one day, down another. So the sentiment is itself very volatile. But I wouldn't take too much comfort that just because yesterday's sale went well, another one, we're out of the woods. Now, with the ESM, it's got a different structure to the EFSF. It's got its own capital. So potentially you might say that it's in a sort of better position. But I mean, we're sort of I would focus right now on the struggles of the EFSF. That's a good barometer for kind of how any kind of future bailout fund is going to ride. And of course the ESM is changing, seems like, from day to day as well. So. Again, I mean, it's still not fixed. And right now, what you see in Eurozone is you have what seems like a solution involving a certain institutional framework, and then the doubts set in, and then if the market pushes back against it, it needs to be reconstituted anyway. I'm sure we'll be talking about this in future shows. Chris, thank you very much. That's all for now. My thanks there to Chris Hughes. Well, for more agenda-setting financial insight, watch our US Breaking Views show every day at 12:30 Eastern, 17:30 BST. I'm Jamie McGeever. This is Reuters.